welcome to The Mill, a podcast brought to you by Mill & Co. I'm Rachel Ballatori, the founder and CEO. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today. I'm very honored to have an incredibly special guest with us today, a friend and former business coach of mine, Maria Kast. Maria's pronouns are she, her, and hers. She's a 3 times business owner and small business coach who's been helping solopreneurs and CEOs with a team consistently grow their businesses since 2010. She is empathetic, emotionally intelligent, a creative problem solver, and experienced business coach and owner. In 2019, she developed her core proprietary process that teaches an intuitive yet structured approach for growing a business. This core process has provided multiple 6-figure results for both her and her clients. Maria elevates entrepreneurs to find, trust, and follow their inner coach so they creatively build their business with ease and in flow. And speaking from personal experience, finding my inner coach, which is essentially my little inner Maria that sits on my shoulder with my inner Rachel that sits on this shoulder, I can attest Maria is fantastic to work with. And I'm so honored that you joined us today.
Glad to be here. So excited. I love connecting with you as much as I possibly can. So I'm really happy to be here and happy to provide some value to your audience. So thanks for asking.
Of course. So today I want to focus on a topic of eliminating overwork, packed calendars. I'm guilty of this, and burnout of teams by creating a culture of intention and discernment. So Maria, what are some important questions that we should be asking our employees to start to create, foster, and to maintain a culture of intention and discernment?
Yeah. So I think I'd like to start if possible, because maybe some people aren't aware of what do you mean a culture of intention and discernment, right? Like, what is that and why would I even want it? So creating a culture of intention, let's start with intention. Intention itself is where you are operating from a place where everything that you do has a very clear purpose, right? Discernment is being able to carry that out in a way where you are taking time to be sure that you're operating from this intentional place, and that whenever something is coming into your path and into your, an opportunity for you, that you're discerning, wait, does this fit or does it not fit for where I'm going? So why is that important? When you have a culture of intention and discernment in your company, now, whether it's you as a leader or your team, and you certainly want to foster this with your team, everything that you and your team are doing is done in a way that there's really no excess, right? Like if you're problem solving, you're always spending and allowing for that time to be sure that you're being intentional and you're discerning whether it's the right move. Whether you are ideating on a next level idea, you're making sure it's in alignment. You're being intentional and you're discerning, is it in alignment with where I want my company to go? So why is that important? Because it gets rid of all the excess, all the busyness, all the wrong decisions, right? The decisions that take you off your path, and it keeps you clear and on the right path. So that's why it's important. Now, getting back to your question, which I'm going to make sure I heard it correctly, is how do you make sure that your team is, or what questions do you ask your team to be sure that they're operating with intention and discernment? Was that your question?
Yeah. How do you, I guess a better way to maybe phrase it is, as an owner or a manager, if you're clear on your intention and discernment and you're like, I know what I need to do, I know what my purpose is, what's the next step to make sure that your team, whether they are parallel with you, beneath you, above you, how do you make sure everyone is on the same page moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that clarity is important, obviously. And that's where that inner coach comes in, like you as the leader getting clear. And then I think more than anything, it's gathering your team and painting that vision for them. Okay. So you not only need to be clear on what the vision is, but you want to also model it for your team. So you want to be modeling, if you want to build a culture of intention and discernment, then you need to be operating from that place, right? You need to be operating from that, like we talked about that time with the inner coach, not overworking yourself, not the packed calendars, and then allowing your team and making sure that your team understands that this is the culture I want to create here. I don't want you overworking. I don't want you out of balance, right? Or not in harmony. making sure you're modeling it and then delivering to them that that is the way you want to operate in the business, and you want them to as well. Because when they're operating in that same place, then you're all going in the same direction, and that's a good thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that just delivering that that's the vision you have for the company, and making sure that when you have your check-ins, whether it's weekly or monthly, or when you're doing employee evaluations, whatever, that you have strategic questions to ask to say, hey, how are you doing in this area? What are you doing? And hey, I've seen you getting off the path of that. How can we get you back on it? Like observing and being clear.
Right. This the summer of 2023 was the first time that Mill & Co. implemented summer Fridays. So we closed every Friday and went down to a 4-day work week. And Maria, you know me, Mill & Co. is my baby. We're 5.5 years in. I work really, really hard. And sometimes I'm overworked, and I will be the first to admit that I need to be way more protective of my own personal time and setting better boundaries. And I've definitely gotten better at it. But when we first implemented Summer Fridays, it was really challenging for 2 weeks because suddenly you've just got less time, which is also a great thing. But really to work through that timeline of, okay, well, if I have less time, it forced my team. We all had to become a lot more productive within that time period. And then over the course of the month, the very first month, productivity went up. We're enjoying our weekends. It felt like we were actually getting an adequate break. But then when we were on. So I encourage anyone that's watching this, if you haven't quite yet done something like that, and that's a pretty extreme to just cut down to a 4-day work week, especially in a really busy season like ours is in the summer, try it. And talk to your team and say, okay, well, if we are going to do this, how do we adjust what we're doing Monday through Thursday to make sure, A, we're not overworked within those days, but B, nothing is slipping through the cracks. It was an interesting process to find that balance.
That's huge, because what you're doing is you are being intentional in discernment in that time, right? There was something that was leading you. Maybe your inner coach was sort of arriving in this way that said, you know what, I'd really love to move to a 4-day work week. This would be something in the summer. And hey, maybe aspirationally, it'll be forever, right? It's always a 4-day work week. But knowing that that's what you wanted, your inner coach maybe prompted you in that place. And then you're like, okay, we can do it. Now, how do we get super intentional and discerning with our time so that we're still operating at a capacity where we're winning and we're, still providing value and we're following through on our commitments.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And so did you do it as a team? I'm curious. Was it the whole team that came together and said, this is how we're going to make this happen?
Kind of. Yeah. We all kind of talked of like, okay, well, let's look at we really just broke it down pretty granularly. What are the clients that we have? What are the projects that they have? When do we have our weekly meetings with those clients? Well, how do we build timelines for project execution, even with our creatives, so that we're not putting ourselves with a due date of a Friday when we're not going to be in the office? How do we adjust our social media posting schedule so that we're not posting on Fridays? Maybe we post Thursday and Monday. So for us, what worked was breaking it down on a client and project basis to set ourselves up for success, or have creatives deliver work to us on a Friday so that come Monday, it's already in our inbox. We don't have to look at it on a Friday. And then building in time to give ourselves Monday and maybe Tuesday to give feedback, make revisions. And then Wednesday or Thursday, it goes back to the client. So it took some work and finessing, but that was really where we started. Was at the end of the day, we know this is benefiting us. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
How do we then make sure that this is not hurting the company and it's not hurting our clients? How do we make sure they still feel that same level of support, attention, follow through, and value while we're taking care of our time?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's like your zone of genius is in that strategic piece. I love that. I need to just call that in, because I've known you as being a super strategic person. You have an idea and a goal, and you get super strategic about how you're going to get to it. And that is really phenomenal. Like that's what helps you to have that success. So now I'm sure y'all are really intentional with your time when you're in those 4 days too. Like you're intentional with your calendar.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think it's created an area for increased productivity by the sheer nature of having less time. And I say this a lot, and I've done a couple speaking engagements where I've gotten to share this line: poor planning perpetuates paralysis. So if I haven't planned in advance, and of course there's 50,000 things more than that I can't control, but there are some things that I can kind of work through of like, here are some scenarios, at least for me as a leader, as a strategist, as a creative, that's really helpful. So I think for leaders also identifying, how do you work? Are you strategic? Are you visual? Are you just jump in and do it? You know, are you verbal? Do you want to talk it through with people? Lean into your strengths, work through that problem to your strengths, and then make sure you're getting the input from other people to make sure it works for those who are working with you and underneath you.
Yeah. Cool. Great.
Yeah. So speaking of working a lot, how would you advise leaders when maybe they spot someone on their team, a colleague who might be overworking themselves, not setting good boundaries, even if it's not coming from the leader? It's just like, boy, you're going to burn out. How do you address that?
Yeah, I think I would advise a leader, first of all, to be very observant of their people, to really have a pulse on their people and how they're operating. Too many times, even leaders get in the weeds, especially if you have a small business, right? You have a small team. It's like you're in the weeds with them. Really paying attention and being intentional with knowing how your people are operating. You know, just even paying attention to the nuances of how are they feeling? How are they showing up? What are they like in this meeting, right? Because we've got the virtual world too. Like how, just be present, right? Pay attention.
Yeah.
Then if you start to notice something as a leader and you're just like, something was off, she or he is off in that meeting. They are off in that feeling off in that meeting. To make sure that you are addressing it. To make sure that that little voice inside of you, or that little feeling inside of you that something doesn't feel right, that you're making sure that offline, you know, or after the meeting, that you're reaching out and saying, you know, hey, Sam, I noticed this. I just want to touch base with you. I've been seeing that, you know, the vibe was off there and I want to make sure everything's cool. Or I've been noticing that you've been answering emails at 9:00 at night. Tell me about that. Because you know that we are creating a culture where we don't want to overwork. Why are you working outside of business hours?
Right.
Help me understand that and start the conversation. When you start the conversation, as you pay attention, intention and discernment, right? As you're paying attention to the conversation, you just continue to ask deeper questions to help them, to peel back the layers of why are they working like this and how can you change it?
Yeah. Yeah. It could be they don't understand that that's not the expectation. Maybe as a leader, you feel like you've communicated that, but it hasn't come through. Maybe they genuinely have too much on their plate and they can't not be online at 9 p.m. and they need to have things off their plate, but perhaps they don't feel comfortable to speak up and say, I'm drowning. I need some help. I agree with you. I think it has to start at a communication level. I think that leaders, regardless of the size of your company, whether you have 2 employees or 250,000 employees, you have to have people and processes in place to have a pulse on the people making that company tick.
Yeah. Rachel, you said something and I find this is so common and you're absolutely spot on, is especially if you have leaders and high achievers in your company. Like we attract, as high achievers, we often attract high achievers as small business owners.
Yeah.
When they don't want to tell you when they're overworked or they're bringing work home or they're doing work, they don't want to tell you because they are high achievers and they want to achieve for you.
Right.
And so you as the leader starting that conversation is imperative, because it's not necessarily that you haven't, like you said, you haven't verbalized it well. Often you're doing that. It's just that that's their nature to be a high achiever. They're going to take stuff home. Yeah. And so paying attention to that and calling it out and saying, this is not what I want. Let's work through another way so that we're all on the same page and we're creating this culture that we have aspired to be at.
It is a blessing and a curse to be a type A individual.
Yes,
I personally live this every day.
Me too.
Maria, you've coached a lot of leaders. You've coached a lot of teams. And I'm sure you've seen just about every issue and opportunity and success under the sun. But if you could try to narrow it down Is there a common denominator that often appears when there are issues or breakdowns within a team or within leadership?
Yeah. Gosh, it's really wide ranging, but I don't think this would come as a surprise that it would be communication. I mean, I think the common denominator there is there's a communication break or there's a communication gap, right? Where either the leader isn't approachable, and so the team isn't communicating to the leader. And when I say leader, I don't even mean necessarily the CEO, right, or the owner or the founder. It could be the creative director within your team, in any leadership position. Maybe they haven't set up the team in a way where the team feels comfortable coming to them, right? Or the team itself isn't aware of the expectations or when it's okay to come to them when there's a problem. It's really all about communication, I would say, is the common denominator there.
Yeah. Like any relationship in life, whether it's in work or out of work, if there are communication breakdowns, I think what I've also experienced is outside of the communication, there are, whether there's stigmas or whatever around, sometimes being really honest and truthful and transparent. And again, I think it comes back to some people who are really high achieving feel that they're complaining, they're slacking, they are failing by stepping up and saying something. And that's just not the case. It might be the case if they don't feel comfortable, or maybe they've tried it in the past with their manager or boss and they've been slapped down. Then yeah, of course they have a reason to be like, oh, I don't want to stir the pot anymore. But I also think we do a lot of internalizing instead of vocalizing. And I've experienced that that's where a lot of breakdowns happen, is we're just all kind of silently in our silos making assumptions, and it's not really actually reality. It's really just our perception of what's happening. I know you and I have worked on that, talked about that a lot.
Yes. Yeah. And I think to add on to that too, is those high achievers or just team members in general, they have set high expectations for themselves. And so if they come clean on like that they're feeling a certain way or something's going sideways, they feel like they failed. Like you said, they failed in some way, or they're being a whiner or whatever.
Yeah.
I think like not only the communication piece, but I think that what I would advise someone who is, however you're feeling, whatever is going on internally, like you said, that internal voice, that internal feeling, or however it shows up for you, paying attention to that and doing something about it. So if you're on a team, whether you're a leader or not a leader, you're a team member, if something in your gut or in your heart or in your head, if you're feeling off in some way, to pay attention to it, self-reflect on it, and then bring it to the person you need. If it's something you can handle it. If not, bring it to the leader, because your leader doesn't want you operating in a way that isn't authentic and transparent and even vulnerable. They want you to come. I mean, isn't that what the culture that leaders are building now? They want the team to be communicating how they're feeling or what doesn't feel right in a situation.
Right. And taking ownership and pride in it, especially if you're in a small business, the employees are just as much an owner as the owner in some instances, and I think when things aren't taken full accountability for, we're not all bought in, is also where there's major breakdowns, because then it's like, oh, well, I'm not a leader, I'm not a boss, I'm not there, I'm just here to do my thing and check out.
Yeah. And that isn't even right. So think about that. That's not even a right way to think, because leaders want you to feel as if you are another part of that you are a part of the company, but also that you are, you're driving the results and you're driving the success of the company as much. And the way we allow people to feel that way is when we make them as if they're owners, treat them as if they are owners as well.
Yep.
right? Like they're part of this team and it's way bigger. This vision that the leader has is way bigger than just the leader. So bringing everyone together as, listen, I want you to take ownership of your position and of this company as well.
And I think maybe showing your team the role that they play on a bigger picture than just the day-to-day. I think sometimes when you get really busy, it's hard to take a pause and say, this is why we do it this way, not just talking about what we're doing. And Mill & Co., we do our blueprint strategy. It's not what you do as a business, it's why you do it. It's why other people care. And I think it's a really good way to lead is by showing people the impact, showing them the opportunity ahead of them. This is where I want to take you as an individual, because here's how it impacts the company as a whole. Is a really strong way to also maintain things like retention, happiness, growth, productivity, value to your clients, better client experience. Like there's a huge trickle down effect from that kind of buy-in, or like, oh, I've got stake stake in this.
Yeah. I read a statistic just yesterday, and I'm going to get it. So I'm not an exact kind of person, but this is close, right? I'm kind of going to paraphrase it, but it was something like companies that invest in the leadership, that whether it's coaching or professional development or whatever it is, leaders that and CEOs who allow their team to invest in that way and allow them to leadership development opportunities, they have 50% of those companies that invest in that way have higher revenues than companies who don't. So it just shows that it pays for you as a leader in the company to make sure that you are bringing your team along in that way, right? Yeah. So that you're pouring into them, allowing them to feel part of the company, higher revenues, and also higher job satisfaction, like you said.
Right. Yeah. So I want to talk about the other side of that coin. What would you say to leaders who have a team member or multiple members of their team that they feel like after repeated conversations, they're just not living up to expectations that have been set, or maybe they're making repeatable, very unavoidable errors? Talk me through what your process would be to say to that leader of like, here's how you manage through this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say, pay attention to that gut feeling. I'm all about the inner coach, right? When you as a leader get quiet enough, and really pay attention to what's happening in your business, like spending some time thinking about like what's working and what isn't. And if you have a team member who it's not working and it's repeated, and maybe you've had the like initial conversations of, is this a training issue? Like, what do they need to be successful? And it's just not happening. Then that is a time for the leader to take that time with the inner coach. Think about, why is it that this is happening? Like, what are some things I can do about it? Is this person a right fit? Ask some of those open-ended questions. And when you land on maybe it's not a right fit, to let that person go, to be okay with letting that person go, because your inner coach will guide you. If they're not a right fit, you're going to feel it. You're going to sense it. And you holding on to that employee, number one, it's hurting the business, the team, right? It's an underperforming member of the team. It's hurting the rest of the team, and ultimately your bottom line. But here's the other piece, is to remember that it might not be a right fit for that team member. So letting them go allows the doors to open for them, maybe in another position or in another area. Maybe they decide they want to own their own business. Like, who knows why those behaviors are showing up. Right. But I think that just kind of like to reel it in a little bit, I think the first thing is, if it's repeated and you've done your due diligence of whether it's a training issue or whatever, and that's not happening, still not happening, to make sure you spend time with the inner coach to say, okay, this person, are they a right fit? I don't think they are. Allowing them, releasing them from your business so that you can, get someone who's a right fit.
The inner coach, Maria, is one of the top 3 things that has stuck with me from our time together. Because if I think anyone that's listening, we can all look back on moments that we've had gut feelings about a situation, a client, a prospect, an employee, an interviewee. We've all been like, ooh, this is how I'm feeling. And we haven't acted on it. And I can look back on my own life, personally and professionally, even relationships with friends, and say, you know what? I knew this all along.
Yes.
And now that it's done, I feel an immense sense of relief and kind of wish I did it sooner, kind of wish that I took this action first, and I think it's one of the hardest things as a business owner. We've got 50,000 things to focus on while also being intentional and intuitive to support the team. But we also have to remember we have to support ourselves and to not constantly be thinking outside of yourself to just, how do I bring everyone up? How do I encourage them? How do I motivate them? What am I as the leader feeling? I should ask myself those same questions and stay in tune and very present with my own feelings and gut, because 9 times out of 10, it's probably right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really important, because you, as the owner of the company, founder, CEO of the company, it's your vision that you're bringing to fruition. Your internal guidance, who I call the inner coach, is guiding you in that way, right? Like, you paying attention. I think that's the most important thing I would like this entire audience to take away. Is the most important thing you can do for yourself is to pay attention to the promptings of the inner coach. Okay. And then act on them sooner than later. Now, when in the early stages, like you said, you didn't act right away, right? But as I'll bet you tell me, as you started to act on those promptings, all of a sudden it got easier to recognize that, wait a minute, this is the way to go. I am trusting this. I'm trusting and surrendering to this. And then it got easier every time. And then what happened? Like, then your profits are growing, your revenue's growing, your team is in alignment. Like, all of this is happening because you're following that guidance quicker. And it's you and your vision that's coming to fruition through those promptings. So your time with the inner coach is imperative, and then following it so you get used to hearing that voice and trusting it. And then you're doing it quicker and quicker and quicker.
For sure. There's so many examples I could give, Maria. I mean, one comes to mind, and I won't share a ton of detail, but we were pitching a prospective client for some strategic work. And it was a 6-week process to just sell them on the idea. It ate up so much of my time. There was so much back and forth. There was so much explaining. Meanwhile, we've done 50 plus blueprint strategies, and it's been a very easy sell because it's a pretty straightforward. This is what it is. This is the value. This is how we do it. This is the deliverable. We sell a lot of them. We do a lot of them. But this took weeks. Trying to prove value of this. Meanwhile, it's stressing me out. It's so much work. And I'm feeling this way the whole time. Probably about halfway through this 6-week process, I'm like, if it's this challenging now, what's it going to be like if they actually sign on as a client? Right? Like, I don't even owe them anything yet. This is just proposal. And so it got to a point where I ended up emailing this prospective client and respectfully withdrew. And I have to tell you, it was terrifying. And here I am, like, I'm walking away from business. It is a big project. It always leads to more projects. We do it really, really well. I'm crazy for doing this. And literally, no joke, within a 2-week window of me withdrawing from that, we signed 2 blueprints within 2 weeks. And this was a 6-week waste of my time.
Yes.
Actually. But I didn't trust myself in the beginning, because I think part of me was like, for sure, struggling with imposter syndrome of, well, this person needs to know how good of a project this is. They need to know how valuable this strategy is. So I'm kind of trying to sell them on how good my product is, which is the little imposter syndrome of like, well, everyone has to believe in me, right? Which we work through.
Yeah.
But the other side of it was, you're always, as an entrepreneur, even 5.5 years in, you're always having that, well, where's the next paycheck coming from? And even though they're plentiful at the moment, you still have that little fear of like, well, I can't walk away from this because what if I need it? I didn't. And then I made twice as much in the next 2 weeks after walking away from that.
Yeah.
And then I look back on it, I'm like, God, I should have just acted sooner. But we go through those waves of fear, perception, not reality, imposter syndrome. And then when you finally come out of it, it was like the most relieving thing. And I'm like, God, next time I am not going to wait 6 weeks to pull this and say, nope, this is not right for us. Thank you so much. Best of luck.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to like dissect that a little bit, because what was happening in the beginning with that relationship was it was restrictive, right? Like, you had to prove something. It was hard. It was challenging. It was taking more time. You had to sell it. It was all this like restrictive, like, kind of energy. And as soon as you were just like, wait a minute, like, this is too much. I need to let this go. Sure.
Yeah.
The fears, all of that come up.
Right.
The key in that moment is to trust that inner prompting. Like when you're feeling restrictive in any way, and this, everyone needs to hear this. If you feel that restriction in that way and that ickiness, pay attention to it, open up to, wait, what do I need to do? Is this a right fit for me? And then what happened is once you trusted it and you did it, you released and you opened up that flow, which is, kind of going back to what I do. I teach you how to build your business in flow. And one of those ways is this. Yeah. You open up the flow, and then what happens? The resources, the clients, they come to you with ease because you let go of that which was so restrictive.
And I think if we, as business owners, you have to reflect on the amount of time something takes from you and think how valuable every minute of your time actually is.
Yeah.
And if you calculate that on even a financial level, a mental and emotional level, it is just not worth it. There is no ROI for that. So that was a really big learning for me. But I too, I'm 5.5 years into entrepreneurship. I still struggle with it. But I think the thing I want to get across in this episode is it's okay to struggle. It's normal. It's human. It's all right. We all do it. Especially as women, I think that we really struggle, particularly with let's prove ourselves here. We get a lot of opportunities. But trust yourself, lean in, and then celebrate the fact that you removed yourself from that situation. But for me, I don't really look at it as what a waste of 6 weeks, even though it was. I look at it as I got out of that. I did that. I did this for my business, and it was hugely profitable from that moment on.
Yes. And so that the key in that was you used it. And this goes back to that proprietary process. My process that I created is you use the number one, the first module, the first block in that is using your current circumstances as an opportunity for growth. So what you just reflected back to me is you looked at that opportunity or that, that restriction. You used that current circumstance of like, this sucks. I don't want to be in it. And you used it as an opportunity to grow. And you're looking back on it. It's like, oh, I evolved through that experience. Like, I don't need to beat myself up about it. I evolved through it. And so whenever you've got those challenging experiences, to remember that, to be like, wait a minute, how can I grow and evolve through this challenging experience, whether it's life experience or business, right? Whether you're a female business owner and it's like, you're putting yourself to this high standard and you're pressing through and you're doing, if it's not feeling right, pay attention and say, wait a minute, I need to grow through this. What can I do to grow through this situation?
Yeah.
That's what, honestly, in my opinion, the best part of growing a business is who you become in the process of building that business. That is the key. It's not about the money. It's not about anything, but like who you become.
Yeah. I could not agree with you more. I love that. I love that mentality. I really love and have been trying to encourage myself to have a really positive, in control mentality about business. It's not out of my control. I'm all over the things I can control, and I'm really optimistic about the things I can't, and that's what helps push me forward. But I want to talk about your core 4 process now that you gave away one of the elements. So your core 4 process includes current circumstances.
Yep.
Observe self, relentless focus. Love that word. And embrace trust.
Yeah.
Talk me through this process, how you developed it, why you developed it, and how you implement it for leaders.
Yeah. So how I developed it was through my own journey of starting and growing 3 different companies. So it was my own experience, but also my experience with the people, the executives and emerging leaders who I was coaching. So that's kind of what came out of it, and time with my inner coach. It was kind of like, I'm seeing this pattern and I'm seeing this way that I help my clients. What does it look like? What is it? There's a methodology to it. There's a system to it. And that inner coach time is what honestly brought about the actual verbiage for it. It was like, oh my gosh, this is what it is. But the first one is, and by the way, this is not a linear process, right? If you see the image of it, it's a circle. and its current circumstances as your opportunity for growth. So always remembering that whatever circumstance you're in as a business owner or in life, and I'll just say, like, as a business owner, it could be, that you have to problem solve an issue with a team member, or that your revenues are down and you have to grow revenue. Like, whatever it is, it's the current circumstance or the results you have in your business right now, and seeing it as an opportunity for growth. So looking at it as, how can I learn, grow, and evolve through this circumstance? The circumstance that I'm in is not outside of me. It's not anyone else's fault, right? No blame game here. Personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. How do I now evolve and grow myself and my business through that circumstance? That's number one. There's a whole lot that goes into that, but that's basically it.
Yeah.
Observe self to maximize growth is the second piece of it. And that is, like, too many people in business especially they're not paying attention. They're like striving and struggling and hustling and going and going. And I mean, when I met you, that's kind of like where you were at. You were at that stage. And I'm like, hold on, slow down, start to observe yourself, your team members, much of like what I talked about before. How are you operating? How can you do differently? What can you do differently? How can you pay attention to your team and notice the nuances of what you need to handle with your team? Like, really observing self so that you're maximizing your growth. You're not just like blindly going through your day in all situations. Mm-hmm. Relentless focus. That's where I start to bring in, it's like the current circumstance of the observed self is more like, I would almost call like the feminine energy, right? More of maybe that woo, or, for lack of a better term, it's more of that introspection piece. Mm-hmm. Then with relentless focus, we get into the real, like, okay, now we're in the masculine energy of the doing, right? Now it's like, how do you set your calendar to reflect how you want to grow your business and what you want to do in your business? How do you make sure you're really protecting your time and not allowing people or experiences or things into your life that aren't going to help you to move forward in where you want to go? Like, real relentless focus on your goal and how you need to operate through that, and strategize, right? 90-day strategies, the whole bit. And then the last one, trust and surrender, is just a lot of what we already talked about. Just really trusting and surrendering that this is a process. Like the fact that of growing a business or evolving through your business, it's a process that you can trust. Yeah. Trust the journey, trust where you are right now, that it's going to be okay. You don't need to worry about if your business is going to succeed. Just continue to evolve through using your inner coach, growing yourself, growing your team, having relentless focus, and trusting that you're going to get to where you want to be, right? That belief, trust, and that surrender into the process of growth.
Mm-hmm. I know what my answer is for this question, but which of the four do you feel that you see leaders struggle with the most, between recognizing their current circumstances, observing themselves, having relentless focus, and then embracing trust and surrendering?
Yeah, I think observing self is probably it's so hard. I say that, I start to come into that, like, yeah, that's definitely it. Yeah. Because they're so busy, right? Yeah. And they let that slide a lot, that observing of like their current circumstances or their team or whatever, that. But honestly, the trust and surrender, I almost want to change my answer. The trust and surrender piece, because they feel like they have to control.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you right now, the more you try to control, the less control you realize you have. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you can trust and surrender and not try to control every team member or every situation or even every piece of you and how you operate, if you will just let go, the more you let go, back to what you said earlier, when you let go of that client, the resources came to you, the revenue came. Same idea. If we hold on to things like this and we don't just let go and trust, it's a struggle.
Yeah. For me, those two, between self-observance and embracing trust and surrendering, are so critically important together, at least in my personal experience, where by staying observant and embracing trust in others and delegating what is my business to other people.
Oh, yes.
They have to go hand in hand, because embracing trust is in my opinion, it's something that's earned, right? And there's an onboarding period, and then it's like, I know you've got this, and even if you make little mistakes here and there, it's going to be okay. Then when those repeated mistakes start to get bigger, faster, longer, and more irreversible, that's where I think the self-observance has to come back into play. And I have to be like, okay, wait, let me check back in. Is this the right vision for my company? And getting into relentless focus. So they're so beautifully laid out, Maria. I love that you've identified these 4 categories, because it is this constant cyclical process that you have to go through all 4, but you want to kind of have all 4 firing at an optimal rate.
Yeah.
To benefit the others. It's just, I really love how you have all this laid out. And to me, those are probably my 2 biggest that I work on mostly. I feel very relentlessly focused on what I need to do. I definitely recognize all the circumstances that I am in and that I create for myself, against myself, benefit or detriment of myself. But yeah, being self-observant, observant, and trusting and surrendering are this kind of cat and mouse game that I think make for a really good leader and a really successful company.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I love those 4.
Cool. I'm so glad.
Share any stories, and you can white label if you need to, of a business leader, founder, whoever that you worked with, that you witnessed them have great success utilizing your core 4.
Oh yeah. I mean, actually you can look at 3 on my website. I just finished. I'm very excited because of my promotional video just launched today.
Oh,
actually. Yeah. I'm excited about it. So there's 3 even there that through this process grew their revenues and grew their team, right? Through using this process. So you can definitely check out that video. They'll tell you themselves, I guess is what I would say there. But where I was going to go, if video aside, where I was going to go is even now a new client of mine. We've been working together now. I worked with her team first, about a year ago. And I've been recently working with her over the past 6 months. And just to watch her go through the process, and what I see happening is as she's walking through this process, she's getting rid of people that aren't in alignment with the business anymore, right? Like she has a vision and she's starting to feel confident that it's okay to let people go that don't fit the vision or who aren't on board with the vision. Whereas before she was trying so hard to like keep them because she cared about them, train them, do more, give them more. But it was like, for how long can you do? I mean, years, right? Finally getting to a place where, wait a minute, I need to do differently. Yeah. I need to, if this isn't a right fit and I'm feeling it in my gut, why am I trying to control it? And I'm not just releasing it and trusting and surrendering that this is not a right fit and this person needs to go. I mean, it's a lot of what we've talked about, but that's one that's kind of more recent. And this process has helped her very much. And then what happens is when you get people who are in alignment with your vision. So now because it's important to talk in revenues, when you get people who are in alignment with your vision, you're able to, as a leader, you're able to focus on that which is going to move the business forward rather than all the muck over here that you're dealing with the day to day. Because let's be real, even if you say, oh, but it's not a lot of time I'm doing this over here. The reality is it's taking you off the ball of where you should be focusing to grow your business. When you can trust that this group over here has your vision intact and is operating from that place, you're free to like really lean into growing that business. So it affects your revenues. Obviously, it grows your revenues.
Yeah, I couldn't feel that story more. And I think the biggest piece is, again, especially as women, especially as entrepreneurs, where we tend to be very empathetic, highly emotionally intelligent, and care about everyone around us within ourselves. And therefore, sometimes we don't make decisions as quickly as we should because of those elements. It's one of the greatest attributes you can have, and one of also the heaviest weights you can have strapped to your ankle, pulling you down underwater. And so by finding the right balance there and staying true to yourself, true to your business, true to your vision and values, it will guide you in the right direction. It doesn't mean it's not going to be uncomfortable. It doesn't mean you may not have a good little cry about it later and want to follow up with that person, make sure they're okay. But at the end of the day, if it is not in line with your vision and it's hurting your ability to grow and your team's ability to function, the writing is kind of on the wall. Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad to hear that she's getting to that point, because it sounds like if she's got a bunch of employees, she's clearly grown something exciting. So I'm so happy that she gets to work with you through this.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to like kind of anchor also what you said is the other piece of it, even for the business, right? When you let them go, if they need to go, it's actually good for them too. Because if it's not working, there's a good chance, and this happens more often than not, where you meet with that person and even they realize like, oh my gosh, thank goodness, because this just wasn't a right fit for me. Mm-hmm. You're holding them back. If you're trying to like make them something or get them to a place where they're operating the way you want them to, it might not be a right fit for them either. Something on the other side of that door is waiting for them that is even better for them. Yep. So to really understand that, like if it's not, and that goes back to the current circumstances, if the current circumstances, this isn't working, then you got to pay attention to that and do something about it and trust that it's there for a reason and to grow through it.
Yeah. I love that perspective. And again, I think it's hard for one party or the other sometimes to speak up. So you want to hope that someone is at that stage of like, I recognize the circumstances. I've observed myself. I'm focused on what I want. And now I'm going to trust that I'm going to take action and it's going to work out for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Just using your core 4 back to.
I love it.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning into The Mill. If you want to learn more about Maria Kast, she will be tagged in the copy of this post. Please check out her awesome new website. Check out the work that she does. Please connect with her, reach out to her. She loves having conversations. I cannot recommend working with Maria enough. She changed my business. Maria, I'm so honored that you came on to talk with me today.
Thank you. I really am glad to see you and see your success, and happy to be here too.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Until next time. Thank you. Yep.